Hello and welcome back to the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. Yes, it is your host, Steve McAllister. On today's episode, we are speaking with a couple of guys who first met on Discord and today are buddies joining the crowd in creation of tools to make sports betting a little bit easier and more fun for sports fans who not only watch, but wager on the games and the athletes who play them. When Adam Rosenberg and CJ Buskey raised the curtain this summer on Handigraphs, their product was solely focused on Major League Baseball. Since then, not only have they realized that this project made business sense, but this week they are launching an NHL Analytics betting dashboard, and we're pleased as a Ryan Reeves punch, or something like that, to have both Adam and CJ break that news on the Gaming News Canada show. So, welcome to the podcast, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Here.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, guys. First off, you probably noticed I'm wearing a sweater. There's two reasons for that. First, up here in my neck of the woods in Canada, we had our first snowfall this morning. We're recording this on Monday, November 10th. A few weeks too early for our liking, but here we are. And then secondly, just as I mentioned off the top, Adam, just breaking the news that you guys are this week adding some puck to the Handigraphs business. So maybe we can start there with you guys and I was thinking, Adam, before I got you guys on, I think it's easy for people to kind of get neck deep in the NFL and U.S. college football right away. You guys have taken a bit of a different path with Handigraphs, but why baseball and now hockey?
I'll let CJ kind of kick it off on this one.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, again, happy to be here, Steve. Thanks for having us on to talk about Handigraphs. Yeah, I think the first thing was this like Handigraphs all started because I had just seen Adam in our Discord like spending hours trying to build these spreadsheets from Fangraphs every night. And but by the way, we appreciated all the work he put in because it saved us time. But it was really just trying to like put together the list of probable starters. That was the main goal of what he was trying to do. And I had kind of just seen this spreadsheet get posted. I'm like, this is just basically like putting together a website to showcase a table for you. That's all this really is. Like, I'm pretty sure it'd be easy to just kind of marry what, you would see from a site like RotoWire and pull that data from Fangraphs and just put that into a very simple, table view on a site. And that would save him a bunch of time. And this is when I had first actually had met Adam. So I didn't know if he like thought I was legit or anything at the time, but I was like, you know what? I got some time to kill. I'll build this website.
Well, your Twitter, sorry to interrupt you, but your Twitter handle was Dads That Bet, and I run a Babies That Bet account, and so you immediately were okay with me because I just thought, wow, like we already got kismet on this one. So that was the first conversation that we ever had.
I should mention this is the second Discord he was. He invited me to his personal Discord. We were actually part of another Discord where he had made that realization. So one awkward Zoom call later, we're in the same Discord, and I put together the site. And one of the things that I had added early was this idea of highlighting stats that were at this time we were in baseball very focused on this metric called hard hit percentage. So which pitchers are just getting hit the crap out of in terms of predicting potentially home runs. So I had kind of put in this highlighting in the site, and he was like, this is amazing. Like I can quickly see, I don't even have to like go and sort or filter through this. I can just immediately see which guys are giving up really hard hit baseballs to which ones aren't. Can we add this for more stuff? And so over time, this was 2 summers ago, it just evolved. Like we started adding more things. We started adding, first it was a pitcher's dashboard. Then it turned into, we have pitchers. Can we get team stats? Can we kind of see like the overall team stats for this? Then it turned into this season for batters. And we ended up realizing kind of, back in the spring that this was something that I think was pretty unique in the market, that a lot of handicappers go to many sites, and really if you're doing day-to-day handicapping, you kind of just want like one view to be able to see everything you need to see for the probables for that upcoming day. And so as it bring this all back around, Steve, around to hockey, as we saw kind of the success of baseball early and not just in the people that really like the site, but also just personally for us betting day to day, using the data on the site. We were kind of focused on, well, how can we, once baseball season ends, what do we do? Where do we take this? And I think we both agreed, and Berg, you can obviously talk some more about this because you've been more in the hockey sort of betting space than I have previously, but we wanted, baseball was successful because it's competitive to a sense, but it's also still somewhat of a niche market when it comes to betting. And we thought, what better way but to incorporate we think a sport that has been neglected from that sense. And hockey was the natural sort of one that made sense.
I was going to say, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
No, the thing I was just, it was, CJ and I, like, what's also one of the things that he had mentioned, the sandbox version, the original version of Handigraphs lived on his current employer's site. And it took 2 seconds of me looking at it and looking at how great the UX was to say, I've watched enough Silicon Valley. I lived in the Bay Area. We got to get this. We got to move this to our own URL immediately because it's going to work. And to tie back to the hockey stuff, I grew up playing hockey and it's always been a big sport for me. And what CJ was able to do with what I had been doing manually was we cracked the code on what makes a sport that is very intimidating to bet a lot easier. And that's sort of why we decided, well, we want to lean into this more so than football or basketball at this point.
Hey, on the baseball piece, it feels like it's an incredible timing. And up here in Canada, obviously people were excited and are still depressed about the Blue Jays losing in Game 7 to the Dodgers. On the flip side, we saw record television numbers, I think in both the U.S. and I think in Japan as well.
Highest rated in 8 years. I believe.
Yeah. And so did you see kind of a corresponding rise with interest in this series as well? And does it end up being a bit of a just great timing for you guys to launch not only the business, but to launch this baseball product?
I think for us, like, ultimately, this just was birthed out of the fact that Berg and I just both love betting baseball. Like, that was, like, at the end of the day, it was just a way for us to try and create our own sort of edge. And the other big thing, Steve, is, like, we're both dads. We both have 2 kids. The number one thing I'm trying to do when I'm developing is, how do I build something that I can take less time on my phone so I don't get yelled at by my wife? That was like if we want to look at sort of the driving sort of charter of Handigraphs initially, that's what it was. So we were going to love this in terms of building for baseball, no matter what, just because it's a sport that we both love. But to your point, Steve, like, I think we kind of just lucked into a little bit of the timing, obviously the pitch clock and what that's done for the game and making it much more enjoyable to go to games. And games are on average going around like 2.5 hours now. You're starting to see bigger players and bigger markets have more success. It's awesome to see. I mean, Adam and I both were very high on the Jays this season.
That was our first bet in January.
I was just going to ask. Yeah. I was just going to ask you guys. Did you see this coming?
Yeah, we did. January 15th. There's multiple. So CJ and I, there's things that we're very different on betting. I'm aggressive in certain areas that he's not. But what we're both really good at together is futures. And there are 2 key texts that I have sent him over the course of our relationship. Christmas Day, I sent him a text saying, "Hey, Christopher Sanchez, 100-1 Cy Young is out," which we had to actually get a guy in Canada to get it down for us because we couldn't get it because it was listed in American markets and we couldn't get anything down on it. So I became friends with a couple of guys. I did background checks and they put it down for us. And now he's hope maybe he can pull it off, but he's second place. But the Jays, I was looking at it and I convinced myself that Sasaki was going to go to the Jays. That was my entire cap on this. And I said, CJ, why is this team ranked they were ranked the same as the A's and the Angels, teams that we knew were going to be worse. And so we put in 40-1. We were on an island because nobody was talking about the Jays. And then I said, just watch in a few months. And then we doubled down in June.
They were 7-1.
They were 7-1 to win the division. And we just said, did a whole show about it. And we just said, you know what? this team doesn't strike out. They're built. They're the I know this isn't a baseball podcast, but I think I speak for CJ and myself when we have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the Brewers. And I think that the Jays are what everyone wants to say the Brewers are in terms of just how they're constructed as a team, where it's youth and plate discipline and winning games in a way that merges both analytics and just good ball. And so from June, I think 6th on, we were all in on the Jays the rest of the year. And, and that's a Philly guy whose core baseball memory is Joe Carter. Like, that is my first major baseball memory, is Joe Carter shattering my dreams before I later went to Ted Martin's bar mitzvah later that weekend. But we have George Springer jerseys that we've already purchased. Like, we're all in on Jays, so it's we loved following it.
Well, let's stay with the baseball geekdom just for a couple of minutes, because I was the national baseball writer for the Canadian Press for those 92 and 93 World Series runs. And my great memory, obviously the Carter home run was crazy, but game 4 of the World Series in Philadelphia, where the Jays came back and scored, I think, 7 runs in the 8th inning. Devon White, I think, had a bases loaded triple in that game to put the Jays ahead. And I remember sitting in the press box at Veterans Stadium, and all the Philadelphia writers slamming down their laptops in disgust, because both back then, the Daily News and the Inquirer, they'd already started filling their pages for the first edition with sidebars and not predicting a Phillies victory, right? And so basically, all those sidebars now were null and void. The Daily News Inquirer ended up, I think, putting full page ads in the first edition, scratched all the stories. And I remember basically deleting 800 words and starting to write a game story all over again, and still having to file on deadline as soon as the game ended. So that was a great. That was the
15-14 game. That was the 15-14 game. Yeah, and then I think the next one was the Schilling. Schilling had the
Kurt Schilling Kurt Schilling.
Yeah, that was actually the arrival of. That was when Kurt Schilling got on everyone. Like, people were like, "Whoa, Kurt Schilling is not a." Cast out, like, Kurt Schilling could be a guy. Was that next game, but that 15-14 game, I very vividly, because Dykstra hit, I think, 3 home runs in that game. That I remember that series. Like I said, those are my first core baseball memories for those ones.
Yeah, and I think I probably was among a group of writers ready to hug Kurt Schilling that night. You get a game that probably lasted 4 hours, that 15-14 game, and then Schilling goes out and throws it's probably like a 2 hour and 15-minute masterpiece, and able to get back to the hotel at a decent hour. It just a little bit further than the Jays, because I'm sure you both of you can understand there's just so much interest about this team. Are there particular things that you liked about this club back in June? Certain players, and again, I don't know if you guys want to get into this, but I'm really big on culture, and not only with teams, but organizations or businesses. And I don't know why it clicked this year. I mean, 2 years ago, I thought this team was unwatchable. The hitters, the plate approach was awful. They couldn't play defense. They didn't move runners. It was just a complete tire fire. And I think that's what caught a lot of people, except for you two guys, obviously. I think that's what caught a lot of people off guard, was just how this team kind of flipped the switch and became this team that played small ball, and became even though, great regular season. And I think John Schneider was absolutely right that this team shouldn't be looked as an underdog, but there was a bit of, the plucky little underdog to this team and the way they play, which I think is a bit of a throwback to how baseball was played 25 years ago.
Well, I'll start with this, Steve. They caught us a little off guard too. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working another full-time job in addition to Handigraphs. I would be sitting on a boat somewhere, writing code and just doing whatever I wanted. Because there was still definitely some reservations. I still think that, like, the starting pitching, we'd always had some concerns about, during the season. I think the big thing, you'll hear Adam and I talk about this a lot on our podcast on Dad's Bet Baseball, that when we're looking at teams, especially in May and June, you're starting to think ahead to the trade deadline, and you're starting to think about teams that might be, sort of like treading water, or, that are trying to make a run. Which teams are going to have ownership that will be willing to spend? and willing to do something. And Toronto was absolutely in that camp. They were always a team that we were like, look, this team's not going to tank. They just gave $500 million to Vladimir Guerrero. They clearly want to spend every offseason. They're active. People forget they did sign Santander this past offseason. He just obviously couldn't meaningfully contribute. So I think for us, that was one of the things that we had always kind of earmarked them as somebody to just kind of keep an eye on. For me personally, I think the other thing was that the fact that George Springer turned back the clock and became 2018, 2019 George Springer. One was just so fun to watch. He's just a great player. He's one of the best postseason hitters probably of all time. But I really think that he infused some life back into that clubhouse that was kind of coming off a disappointing year. I mean, there was people thinking that he might be DFA'd or they would be trying to move off of him coming into this season. So that was something that, and again, with our site too, like we kept seeing this. We're like, the stuff that we're seeing with Springer is not out of the norm. Like all of his advanced stuff around hard hit, barrel, contact rate, BABIP, everything was lighting up in red, which on Handigraphs, red is good, blue is bad. Right. And so we had kind of consistently seen that. And I think he was clearly somebody who was kind of carrying them somewhat. And then Vlad started to get hot and the rest of the team really started to come together in the last couple of months.
And I would also say Addison Barger was another one that we saw all year. And the joke that we used to make on our site, because he consistently had a high BABIP and would have high barrels, low ISO. And so the joke was, because we would see Twitter cappers, because we would see people that would put out, oh, Addison Barger is going to hit a home run. And we said, no, he is not, but he is absolutely going to get on base. And our data kind of proved, like, Addison Barger is one of those guys who I loved him last year. Like when they did all the call-ups, when they sort of fire sailed 2 years ago, I would argue it was not really a fire sale, but when they got rid of a lot of the guys at the trade deadline in 24, they kind of had youth the rest of the year. And he was one of those guys that they wanted to give at bats to, and they got him in there. And we were seeing it on the site that he was always read in these high contact areas. Like he has the makeup actually of a guy who could lead the league in batting. He's got almost a Bobby Witt style of play. And you could look at that and you could see that. And we would always say, it's great, guys. Like, don't bother betting his. Like, I know he had 20 home runs, but we will say this still about Addison Barger. Addison Barger is not a 30 home run hitter guy, but that is a dude that can absolutely hit 320. And we were seeing it all the time on the site. And in the playoffs, that's one of the areas where Handigraphs was so effective for us, is that since our data was consistently refreshing and other sites kind of closed books at least closed books to the public, no one was going to research at bats, running postseason at bats. We had all that. Barger and Ernie Clement were just always at the top and just constantly making contact with the ball the entire playoffs. And something that was normally scary to bet, which is a playoff baseball team that could be taking people out. We were all in on Springer. We were all in on Clement. And every single time we would put the lineups next to each other, we're like, these three guys alone can carry this lineup.
Hey, the other thing, just one more question on the baseball, sure. And that's the Alejandro Kirk. And if you're someone who's never watched a baseball game before and you saw Alejandro Kirk walk up to the plate, you'd probably think you're watching a slow pitch game in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton in July. And what is it? Like, again, I'm thinking the data shows you, like, this guy, he's an absolute monster with 2 strikes. He can hit for power. It's almost, it's a bit strange to see him hit. I know he's not a great runner, so hitting into a double play down in the World Series isn't surprising. But on the other hand, he's a great 2-strike hitter, and you wonder, again on that play, I just wonder if maybe that's feeling it a little bit. But oftentimes, Kirk takes that pitch and drives it into right field, and I'm just curious what the data showed on Kirk for you guys through the year.
What? You're lucky, Steve, because on Handigraphs right now, we actually still do have the last lineup from the World Series Game 7. So I'm just pulling up Kirk's page right here, and the biggest thing that I think sticks out for me with Kirk is he is a high walk, low strikeout guy for starters. He almost has around a 10% walk rate throughout the year, only an 11.7% K rate throughout the season. When you look at from the things such as WRC plus, which a lot of people in the baseball community will highlight as 100 is sort of the average. And when you're above 100, that's good. Players like, the more elite players in terms of power and hitting, like a Judge and Ohtani, you're going to see them in like the 150s in that area. Kirk is about a 116 is what I'm seeing here for the season, which is still good. That's like above average for a hitter. But the biggest thing, and I think this kind of lines up, and it's unfortunate for Kirk too, like the way that Game 7 ended, like it's you can't put any blame on him whatsoever for that. Like it's sometimes I think in some games in baseball, like there's really just like kind of it's blameless. Like it's just this is just how the result happened. Like, and the Dodgers were fortunate to get some big at bats from Rojas there, but his contact rate was almost 84% across the season. When you extrapolate that across all batters in baseball, that's like top 10% of batters, and that's just basically saying almost 84% of the time when he swung, he made contact. Doesn't mean that he made a single or that he actually got on base. Might be a foul ball, but that's a really good indicator for somebody that is just great contact point and sees the ball really well. So whenever we are using the site, somebody like him would certainly stick out because you'd see a really high contact rate and go, look, like if we're capping, pitcher outs, for example, this is one of the reasons I thought Blake Snell struggled so much in the World Series was these guys are going to always have long at bats. They're going to make you work. And that's something that we had kind of been able to use hopefully to our advantage throughout the season.
Hey, Adam, sorry. One more question on the Jays and that. And again,
we can talk. Look, we can talk baseball forever. Like we literally run a baseball podcast. That's our thing, man. We'll have to get you on ours as we're doing our team previews, just as a side note. So it'll be great.
That'd be fun. Just in terms of like, I'm someone, in the playoffs when I got home, I was on a 2-week vacation with my wife in Greece, so I couldn't bet while I was away. But when I got back, the World Series, I'm a $1, $2 betting, so I'm making some prop bets, on Guerrero to hit the first home run, blah blah blah. But can you explain to people that don't do a lot of wagering how Handigraphs and the data you guys are putting together, like what kind of bets do you take that data and apply them to? And again, that sounds like a real basic question, but
no. This is like why we made the site. So one of the things that we started to see with people that used Handigraphs is that people that had never bet baseball before were suddenly comfortable betting baseball because of the core idea of I would bet this sport if I knew what was good and what was bad.
Right.
Because I'm told by a ton of other sites, hey, this guy is hitting 9 out of 10 games, or this guy is that I've been told trends, but I don't understand the data. And ultimately, bettors are becoming more price sensitive. They're definitely odds sensitive, but they're not as data sensitive as they used to be. They just want to know what it means. And so, if we're telling somebody to go to the site, we have a list in the glossary that is, here's what each of these metrics mean. And then CJ mapped it to, well, here's a sample prop that you would look at for this. And so we spent a ton of time making videos of here's how to find an outs prop for this. Here's how to do whatever, a common one. And we had people that started making their own filters, which is really, really cool. We have this one guy in our Discord, Adam Mosley, who came up with his own filters for Handigraphs that allowed him to automatically pull a list of batters every day that are likely to have 2 hits. And so he was betting these plus 300 plays and they were hitting. Like his ROI is bonkers. And all it was, he just said, it's happening on these things. We added this column, so it all works. But when someone goes to our site, what we want them to be able to do, like I said, is know what's good and what's bad. And then some of the sample things that we would look at, we try to make it easy because people want to bet home runs. They want to bet bases. They want to bet strikeouts. They want to bet outs. And so while CJ and I go deep into markets like the double play market, which shout out to team total bases, shout out to a certain sports book that will not be named that got rid of that market. And I'm highly confident it's because of us. But for a regular anybody betting $1, you just want to be able to say, hey, is this guy going to go over his strikeouts? And we made it so you click the guy's K rate and it automatically goes to the lineup. And that lineup is going to tell you, hey, here's a number. Here's 8 out of 9 guys are blue. And other sites will say, will kind of tell you a trend. And what we're actually teaching people is we're not telling you the trend. We're actually just telling you this guy has not been performing, and that's what it is. And, we go off the idea that like trends are not predictive, trends are informative, but data can be predictive. And so that's one of the reasons why, we don't try to compete with anybody. We think that we're a really good resource for anyone using a data betting insights platform that just says, hey, I want to go one step deeper. This is something that we do and something that we help out with. So
yeah, and something too, Steve, that's unique. Like if you're just kind of looking for, like you said, you're kind of I just want to see like who would be a good guy to hit a home run, or like I would want to see which guy is going to have a higher likelihood to have is this a good matchup for you, Savage, to throw 12 plus Ks, something like that.
Right.
One thing that is as core sort of pillar of the site was having splits. Like just because you have like season stats, that's not really meaningful if you're trying to do day-to-day betting. Like for fantasy purposes, absolutely. Season, larger samples, better. But for day-to-day stuff and really particularly baseball, their batters and pitchers are very much players and creatures of habit. And we introduced a type of split called like last 30, 60, 90 plate appearances. So instead of looking at what is this guy's last 2 weeks, what is this guy's last sort of date range, we're literally looking at how many times over the last 30 did this guy get up and strike out. And for us, that proved to be really important because you see this all the time. You saw this in the playoffs even for a lot of the Dodgers hitters. Guys that are in bad form, takes them a little bit to get out of that slump before they start being able to hit the ball well, and then vice versa. Like Vlad was, again, one of those guys, if you kind of went in the last 30, 60 on the site, was like just blood red for everything. And because he was really seeing the ball well, he was getting good matchups. So that's something important too, I think, for people that are just getting into it or trying to look for ways to figure out what to do if you're just doing day-to-day betting is, especially for baseball, recent form matters a lot. And when you look more just at trends, it doesn't tell you the why. Whereas at least whenever you pull up our site, if you lose a bet, you can say, okay, all right, maybe I lost this bet, but I still felt good for the reasoning behind it. Whereas like this guy was over this in the last 8 of 10 games. Well, maybe he had ended up for some reason getting 7 plate appearances in 6 of those games for whatever reason. You don't really have context whenever you look at it that way.
Ready to accelerate your digital growth? Bede Gaming delivers a market-leading platform with best-in-class products driven by secure, cutting-edge technology. With an open API platform, robust integration suite, and unlimited configurability, you can achieve the ultimate end-to-end customization for your iGaming ambitions. Bede Gaming is your partner for success. Get in touch at bedegaming.com. When I hear you guys talk, it makes me wonder if there's almost a third category of bettors have emerged. And I think you've got the sharp guys, the guys that are, either they're doing it for a living or they're all in and spending a lot of time every day. You've got people like me that in this new world of legal sports betting in North America now have a couple of apps on their phone and they're, betting $2, $5, maybe the odd $10 bet. And then there's this new category of people who are like me, but are more excited about betting now. So they're reaching out to a company like Handigraphs because they want more data. They understand a little bit more about how betting works now, and they want to take it to the next level where, they still want to have fun, but they also want to be a little bit smarter instead of just, putting $1 down because you happen to like Trey Savage.
CJ, do you want to talk about one of the some of the export stuff that we have on it? I think this is good. Kind of tie. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so
it's like why we did that.
Yeah, so one thing also, Steve, on the site, and you can, I'm sure we'll get into hockey here in a second too, but
eventually.
Yeah,
keep talking baseball though.
No, we can talk baseball for years, man. You should see the
soul of-
spreadsheets that CJ and I already did win totals for
Handigraphs.
next year. Like, yeah,
We had our podcast last week, Steve, where we were going to do a free agent tease that was supposed to go about 2 minutes, and it ended up going 20. And it probably could have gone longer, except we were already at basically the duration of what we do our podcast for. But so one thing we added, though, to your point, Steve, is like I see a lot of people today Obviously, AI is become more and more prevalent, and folks that are getting into betting think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go ask ChatGPT to tell me who to bet on today.
Right.
And look, I'm not going to lie, there are times where you might get lucky, and ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these AI chatbots will actually give you something relevant that you can use, that you can bet on. I'm not saying these were models that were pre-trained on data that exists on baseball websites for decades, basically. But one thing we have in Handigraphs is there's an ability for you to go in. If you don't even know what that means, if you see a lot of red and a lot of blue, you can still click this export button. It'll give you basically a file that you can take that's directly from that dashboard, take that to ChatGPT. All of a sudden now you have way more context to give to some of these different AI bots, that it can review the data for that day, and you can ask, look, based on the stats that you're seeing in this table, which pitchers should I target for strikeouts, or which pitchers should I target for hits allowed or earned runs allowed? So that's like we have a video on that too on our how-to, which you can check out at any time. But we added stuff like that to be able to be like, look, if you don't have time, or you're trying to even still learn more about like what some of these metrics mean, just go and export the table, load it up to one of these different AI bots or chat bots, and it'll help you decide on what to do. And that's something I'm hoping later in the future we would have, potentially a way where you could just ask that directly on the site. But for now, that's a way that our users have leveraged it.
That's great, guys. Yeah, we'll have to do. Maybe we'll do a spring training podcast in February.
Winter meetings, man. We're nerds. We'll do all of it.
All right. Well, let's definitely talk about doing something in the new year when as the expression goes, pitchers and catchers report to spring training. I want to get into hockey, Adam, and again, kind of how you mentioned your roots in hockey, and I think you'll understand that hockey is a bit of a traditional sport, and I think there's been a lot of dragging people kicking and screaming in analytics, and we certainly have seen that with some of my former peers in the sports media industry. Kind of taking what you guys learned from baseball, how does it work with the NHL and the data that you're collecting, and what is it what kind of data are bettors looking for when it comes to National Hockey League games and players?
So I can kick it off, and then CJ to build all the back end. So I think he'll have some good opinions on it. But so I played growing up, and hockey is such a high variance sport that even more so than I would argue that hockey is the most high variance sport. Just you can have a team that's up 3-1 and you blink. As the other night with the Stars Stars Nashville is a perfectly good example of how hockey works, where the Stars were up 2-1. You blinked, it was 3-2 Nashville. They won 5-4. So I lost every bet on that game. But the thing that I, at the core that is really important for hockey is effectively chances of scoring and chances of stopping scoring. And that comes to life in, Corsi or Fenwick or, expected goals. There's a lot of the hockey community that says, hey, I don't care about anything other than just a guy getting the puck in the net. I don't care about his expected. And we try to sit somewhere in between. That's why we offer both metrics on the site, because he's right. You could have I'm sure Eric Lindros's expected goals was bonkers, and the numbers that he put in, it just wasn't. Part of that reason is because he didn't play a ton of games because he was always hurt. But we established on the site that the first thing that we knew we wanted to do was, okay, if you were to cap a hockey game, what does it start with if it was comparable to any other sport? And we both agreed that it's the goalies, because that changes how a team will play. It changes how the guys will play in front of them. It changes, frankly, how many goals are going to be let up. And that just determines how game flow goes. So we started with wanting to say, okay, well, how can we make an easy way of goalies being good or bad and sort of model it after some of our pitching metrics? And that's where, CJ, frankly, he told me to just back off and let him cook so that he could just kind of get in. And he's like the last couple, like the last few years, I've used the Money Pucks of the world, the Hockey References of the world, and gone to 3 different sites. But CJ, who's not a big hockey bettor, was really good to do this because, he just said, well, let me see what's out there and what actually works and what doesn't. He can kind of share a little bit more on why he keyed on certain metrics as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, Steve, like with hockey compared to what we were building with baseball. So, and it's a good point you made, because like these are two sports that are at opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of where the analytics community is in terms of being in baseball. It's like too much, somewhat, I think, on the analytics community controlling the narrative, whereas hockey, I mean, we have things like NHL Edge, like you have the
Right.
high danger chances and stuff, and I think people are starting to get more interested in that. But the key difference in building this was there's so much documentation and conversation around building advanced analytics for baseball. I mean, baseball literally has StatCast and Baseball Savant that is a completely dedicated site towards it, that many fans will just go to that instead of even just going to like MLB.com. NHL doesn't have that. NHL has, they have the data available. Thankfully, like the data that we were able to get for Handigraphs, it's all, it's data. If you wanted to go build this right now and pull data, like you could access this. This is publicly available data that NHL does put out there. But the biggest challenge was really trying to figure out, because you have sites like Money Puck, you have Natural Stat Trick, both very respected in their analytics for building some of these different types of metrics, but they're also kind of black boxes. Like they don't share maybe especially what is their secret sauce, probably obviously for good reason for not doing that. So I think for me, when I was helping try to build this and figure out which stats we really cared about, we started with the standard metrics. Like you'll see this on the page right now. Obviously, like we have saves, save percentage, all the stuff that you would expect from regular box scores. And then we started to add in, we have our own expected goals formula. We have our own high danger, low danger, medium danger sort of formula. Again, there's stuff documented out there that can help you understand this. But we had to kind of build that from scratch. Whereas baseball, we had, I feel like, a lot more of a reference. The good thing, though, I think for us as a company kind of going forward, is just that this allows us a lot more control. We could have certainly reached out to some of these different providers, see if we wanted to work with them, incorporate their data, work as partners. But the biggest thing is we wanted, as with baseball, the flexibility to build our own splits and our own stats. And that's something we wouldn't have got with them. With goalies, for example, if you go to the dashboard, you'll see we look at last 60, 120, 180, 240 minutes of ice time. And it's not just that across the season, but 5v5, power play, home, away, all splits that you can't access that anywhere else. So that's why we ultimately said it's going to be harder to kind of build this from the ground up, but it'll allow us a lot more creative control in terms of the data we can provide users moving forward by doing that.
Hey, Adam, just like in baseball, you talked a bit earlier about total bases with baseball prop betting. And I just wonder with hockey now, like what are the kinds of bets, going beyond whether or not Austin Matthews scores twice in Boston on Tuesday night when we push out this podcast. Like what do you think the data is helping with, and kind of does it steer bettors towards having a little bit more fun with some different wagers?
So, I'm I love plus money betting. I'm pretty juice averse. Like I just won't lay a lot to do things.
Right.
So finding alts on dogs, for example, CJ was mentioning how we have the different types of splits. You can be able to see a good team I'll use, for example, over the last couple of weeks has been Anaheim. So Anaheim started slow. There was a lot of buzz around them going in. And they started slow, but what we were able to identify early last week, people weren't as hot. Dostal was still, who's their goalie, was still getting plus money. They were still an underdog, a pretty heavy underdog in certain games that our data said, this guy is absolutely performing. So simple bet, as much as just the money line on a dog in a hockey, which is a sport where the dog is always pretty much live. Which is, I never understood. I know, like the Toronto, real famous one is that every year when the Coyotes still had their team in Arizona, Toronto would be a -400 favorite for their one trip there. And
Right.
I don't know if it's because Austin Matthews' ties there, whatever it was, and they would lose. They would mostly lose those games because one, it's a very difficult place to fly to, and two, no team really should have a probability in any sport of near 80% of victory. Like that's just not true. And there was this tremendous value on the Coyotes at that time as a plus 360 dog. We try to first and foremost show people, hey, a lot of these matchups where you're seeing where someone's making someone the favorite or not, you can bet the dog and you have a good chance. Like the Blackhawks are another one that this data all shows. I think that as we add some more things to the site, what we're hopeful that people can see is shots on goal. Block shots is a really nice one that nobody really touches, but that's more of a second half of the season thing because the urgency that goes into blocking a shot doesn't really happen in the first 10 days of the season. But I think the big ones that we're trying to focus on is that people betting points, people betting goals, and goalie saves is a real good one that we on our dashboard now in its current form. We have the tools. We have the tools there for you to come and bet totals, come and bet money lines, come and bet the spreads. If you like a dog, I highly recommend doing a reverse puck line. It's usually 3-1, and it's just bonk. And everybody pulls their goalies these days. And certainly I would say goalie saves, which is a market that it doesn't seem like any books ever pay attention to, and is a really, really fun way to bet the game and have a pseudo degenerate sweat going for the 2 hours that you're watching a hockey game.
Adam, I'll start with you on this one. And again, I think you and we've certainly crossed paths through emails and LinkedIn, and I've been familiar with you since I started covering this industry almost 5 years ago. So, it feels like the Handigraphs is almost a bit of a detour for you. We're kind of veering off the beaten path because you've had other jobs in the gaming industry, and I just wanted to hear a little bit more about your story in the gaming world. And does it just go back to 2018 when Passport was overturned, or was this a space where you were dabbling in before that?
So 2018, when it got overturned, I can tell you I sort of dabbled in betting then, and I can very proudly will admit my biggest gambling loss, and I had no idea what I was doing, was the Patriots-Rams Super Bowl, where I just kept live betting the over. For those of you who don't know, that game being 13-3, things did not go well. But the pandemic sort of supercharged me on betting because we all were at home, and I said, all right, well, I'm going to start reading about probability and price discovery and logic, and I had a lot of time to do that. I was working in esports, and I was asked by a pretty large sports media company to come and be their communications director, which at the time was a dream job. And the experience didn't work out well. And but I was able to kind of find a way to lean in. And then what I started doing was I started identifying that, well, a lot of these startups and a lot of these folks that are in the space don't really know how to tell their story. And having a communications and PR background, I merged, and also being, I would say at least an advanced bettor. I was able to merge understanding what a product's supposed to do with what a product is supposed to talk about when it comes to media, and started building my network through helping all these companies. And where Handigraphs has been able to fit in for me is that a lot of my clients on the PR side are apps and are looking for subscribers and are building product. I'd never done product marketing, especially for my own company. And now I talk to CJ every day about, well, what's our churn? What's our MRR? What are we and a lot of different things that I now know my clients are concerned with every day. And I just have a hands-on approach to, well, how are you getting your users to move past a 2-week period? Like, where are we seeing drop off? And so for me personally, it's been able to give me another weapon in my arsenal of communications and marketing, where I'm talking to any of these groups that I'm already doing their public relations, and I'm able to say, well, look, why don't I help you build a community program through your Discord? Because I have a lot of great hands-on experience from a product end on Handigraphs of these things worked, these things didn't. This is how, this is how kind of the churn works, and some of the basic things that I think have really helped me relate to some of the problems that any of my clients have, or any ones that are in the startup space that are building things within sports betting in general.
And what about you, CJ?
Did he freeze? Oh, he did. He'll be right back though.
I mean, right.
Yeah.
Right
No,
back.
it's like while he gets back, while he just, I don't know what happened. He lost his Wi-Fi for a second, he just said, but which happens in New Jersey. But he yeah, it's just like for me, it's been a whole, you always want to know what your clients' problems are. And this has allowed me to hands-on know what they're thinking about each day of like, how am I scaling? How am I doing this? So yeah, he said he should be back if you see him in the waiting room.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll keep an eye out for him. I'll get CJ to answer this too when he rejoins us, Adam. Sure. But obviously, you're following everything going on with the NBA scandal right now, and of course, this conversation happens like literally less than 24 hours after the latest Major League Baseball investigation into the two pitchers. How worried are you about kind of cross the board ban on prop betting? And again, I guess getting you to put your PR hat on here too is what, are we at a time where people need to take a step back a little bit on prop betting and obviously there's a business interest for you with Handigraphs as well. Sure. But where do you sit on what's going on with prop betting right now?
I mean, look, I'll give you my standard industry answer, which I think is right, which is the system worked. So what people need to understand is that with millions of transactions that are happening on props every day, the improprieties are much easier to spot now because of having these investments, having data around, well, where's this coming from? Who did this and who did what to prevent impurities within the game. And so just as a baseline, it worked. The system works. We've said this for years in every industry. Sunlight and transparency kills, and that is what happens. So legalization has allowed you to be able to see things that previously would not have happened, been able to find. But from a betting perspective, people search for edges to exploit within props or to exploit within anything. If props fail to exist, there's going to be another market that someone's going to find. We talked about earlier how our site was giving people a pretty substantial edge on the double play market in teams to turn a double play in baseball.
Right.
That's not a market that anybody was touching. What happened? They got rid of it. What did we do? We moved to another market and found that fine, we're going to do team total bases, or we're going to do combined pitcher outs. If you are a sophisticated bettor to the point where you're doing some of these things, you're going to find your edge because your brain is wired in a way of, well, it's me against the book all the time. I'm just trying to find what the next, what that next, edge is. And I don't think that banning all props is necessarily a way to solve for a problem. Because if you ban, like I said, if you ban all props, then what happens when you have the exact same problem, but it's on a totally different market? You're going to ban that market too. That's not, I think it's confusing chicken egg type of stuff. The props existing is not why the behavior happens. The bad the bad thinking and the taking, the search for that edge a bit too far is why some of that happens. So keeping these systems in place that are identifying where something like this happens, before it gets worse. I mean, the baseball one is hilarious because these guys made like no money off of this, and it's just crazy. Just like you threw away your entire career to be able to for nothing, for pennies on the dollar. And the NBA stuff, it's I think that the NBA and I think the leagues taking a zero tolerance policy on people having anything to do with it. I think that is the continued way to prevent this from happening, because these are people that, what's Jonte Porter going to be able to do with his career now? Like, he plays in Europe. Like, I mean, he's never going to be able to play in the NBA again. Like Emmanuel Clase, never going to be able to play in MLB again. I mean, these are guys, like, if you're a professional player, these are your dreams gone. And there's a lot of people that are not going to want to, most people won't want to risk that.
Is limiting an easy fix, Adam? And I'm thinking again, like I think it's fun. Like I said, during the World Series, I was betting. I was making 10 bets a game for like anywhere from $1 to I think I placed one $5 bet. But it was fun for me, And if I happened to, if I think I made Guerrero hit a home run one night, and I think I made $20. That's the most money I've ever made placing a bet since the Ontario market open. That was kind of cool. Do you think limits might be a solution to this issue? And again, I'll take there's a lot of people out there concerned about problem gambling and gambling addiction. Some of them are pointing to prop bets as being a major problem with that. Would limiting be a solution?
I mean, limiting all that does is so that just basically creates like, so it's less liability for the operator. That sort of feels like punting it. It doesn't feel like you're solving any sort of problem by saying, well, you can only get X down. Right. That's not, I mean, I guess that there is to a certain extent, yeah, this money moves the market, but again, markets are all betting markets they're reactive, not predictive. That's the thing. People talk about this with prediction markets. Even prediction markets are reactive to news or people or doing whatever. They're not predictive. And so the only thing that's predictive is when you have your hard data and you're able to do your tests over 100 times and do what you need to do. So I don't think that the limiting is going to solve the problem, because all limiting is going to do is force people to do this in a way that is non-regulated, which then gets even worse, because if you can't track where the money is coming from, then you have an entirely different problem, because you have people doing this and you can't tell who's involved or how deep it goes down the well.
And you pointed out earlier that they'll just go and bet on something else. And again, when you bring up prediction markets right now, there are people who have been around the gaming industry for a long time saying that, yeah, prediction markets aren't going anywhere, and that it's another product, just like daily fantasy sports. Or 4 months ago, it seemed that every newsletter I'd read was talking about sweepstakes every week.
Yeah.
and we don't even mention, or rarely on this podcast, about the people, and including my parents and grandparents going to the retail store and buying their lottery tickets. And so
here he comes. Here's CJ.
Yeah, there we go, CJ. So gaming's part of, it's part of the fabric. I mean, obviously there's work to be done on the responsible gambling side, but I think you're right, Adam. If you can't get something one place, you'll go somewhere else and get
it's a vice industry. I mean, that's just that understanding, like the approach of, well, we'll just get rid of it and then it'll be fine. This has never worked. The prohibition failed for that exact reason, which, by the way, I always like to remind people, Prohibition came back on my birthday, December 5th. So like, that's got to mean something. Obviously not 1980, but it's getting rid of these are symptoms. These aren't causes. And I know that isn't always like the thing that people want to hear, but I just can't stress enough that if you get rid of the systems, if you get rid of markets, you're going to have people moving to new markets. And if you get rid of the ability to do anything with these markets and bet, then you're going to drive people towards doing it in a illegal format, which you can't track. And then you're going to, I hope you're going to be making deals with the Cash Apps and the PayPals and all these people in the world, because now you have a whole different problem on your hands where you're going to want to understand what people's transactions are, which creates a whole other mess of basically how are you dealing with people's data and what they're doing with their private time and activities.
Hey, CJ, and good to have you back. I think this question will help you maybe get into your own story around how you got into this industry as well. But I just wonder, how do you turn these conversations on Discord and kind of creating handigraphs? It sounds like a bit of a passion project in the beginning, to now, you have something that you think there's a business here. And I'm assuming, baseball and hockey is just kind of, you're just scratching the surface here, and you're going to add other sports as you and Adam move along here.
Yeah. I mean, I think it started by, well, I mean, A little bit of some selfish reasons. We both put a lot of hours and time into building it. And I think when you go through building a product, especially like where you're not, your goal is not when you first meet to, hey, this is what we're going to do. Like, we're going to go found a company that's going to go make money. Like, the primary reason for building this is to go make money. Like, the primary reason I mentioned before we built it was just to help us with our day to day and make sure that our wives maybe weren't nagging at us on our phones as much. But the reality is, once you start building that, you realize all of the effort and the work that's required into actually putting it together. And that kind of does two things. One, it mentions the first thing I said, where it's like, you would like to potentially be compensated for some of that time, but also it makes you realize how hard it is to take a concept and actually get it into production, and actually have a working website, a working app that people are able to use. And that also makes you realize that there's not a lot of other people that are going to go out there and put that time and effort into doing that. And certainly, there are many that have built other great betting startups, not to say that they aren't putting in a ton of time either, but I think that's kind of what we looked at. It's like, wow, like, it took a lot of work to be able to kind of put together some of these different data pipelines and everything to power the site. We might have like a real sort of niche or edge here in the market for this. Why don't we try and kind of, this past summer, really putting up the subscription and the paywall for us it was also a kind of a test to see, like, all right, like, are people, like, we had, prior to launching, Steve, we had, I think, over 200 people that had, like, literally no marketing, no advertising, anything, that had somehow been able to get an account and start using the site. I saw it like being tracked every day. We had upwards of almost like close to like 500,000 page views like within a given month. And a lot of that is people refreshing dashboards, but
Right.
We had kind of seen like, wow, like we're doing no marketing for this, and yet this seems to kind of still be organically spreading. And then when we launched it, it ended up that we just continue to see more growth. One of the biggest things that I saw too was after baseball season, come into September, I thought, okay, we're going to see like ridiculous churn coming from this thing, that everybody who had signed up, it's baseball season's over. Not as many people are going to be betting on the playoffs. We didn't know how many people were going to try and stick around to see what we were going to build with hockey. We had promised it, but we didn't have anything live ready by, October 7th for the first game. So, and what was really surprising was, we certainly did see some churn, but not anywhere near, I think, what we had initially anticipated. And I think that makes it exciting for us kind of going into hockey now, knowing like, all right, well, as part of your subscription, like, you're going to get access both to baseball and for hockey. And for the folks that had signed up over the summer, then this is something that they get to kind of play around with here for a few extra months without having to invest any extra dollars into.
Were you guys were you stressed about not launching the hockey product in time for the start of the NHL season?
I personally, I don't know how, I can't speak for Berg.
I'll tell after you. I want to hear what you were thinking, and then I'll say it.
I think so. As the developer behind it, I wasn't stressing because I knew it wasn't ready. Like, I was like, I would be more stressed if I had pushed this and we had like the data was like vastly incorrect, or we weren't pulling in lineups correctly, that it didn't match the user experience that people were used to seeing. I'm much more meticulous about those things. And I think there was like a weekly text that I was sending to Berg, basically being like, hey, like, I'm not forgetting about it. Like, I am working on this. But ultimately, when you're building a site like Handigraphs, which is focused on analytics, like, it's not like the most work is building like the database. Like, that takes up 90% of really what's putting together. Once we got the dashboards and stuff ready, like, the front end stuff was actually pretty straightforward, especially since we had baseball. We could just kind of copy over a lot of the design elements. So I wasn't personally that stressed. However, I knew that this was something that was top of mind for Berg. And like, my deadline was kind of like, all right, once we get past the World Series, then we're going to need to have something. And thank God the World Series went 7 games is all I'm going to say.
Adam?
Yeah, so it's great because this is also like shares a little bit about our roles within the organization. So CJ is both CEO and CTO, and I'm CMO and I guess head of sales. I don't know, like whatever we do for ours. But I would purposely leak out there over the last few months. Oh yeah, it's coming without a date, and CJ just like just CJ would have this sort of we would have these unspoken conversations of hey, do not promise people dates, but yes, I am on this. But one of the things that we did really well with baseball is that we said to people, hey, give us feedback, give us feedback. And I had a conversation with CJ very early on where I said, my job is to protect you from everybody's bad ideas. And because CJ wants to help and solve everybody's problem, and he's done a great job doing it. But I want to make sure that he can focus because I can't do what he does, and he's our lead. And it's when he says it's ready, I trust him that it's ready. But yet to the point about he nailed it. I was thinking the same thing. It was the World Series, the World Series going 7. I was getting all these updates of like, oh yeah, this is happening, this is happening. People aren't even really checked in for NHL until really December anyway, when they look outside and it's cold, and so they're like, oh, I should watch this sport with the people with the skates. And I say this as I'm trying to get my son on skates in the next 2 weeks. And but CJ was like, really, we both agreed we want something before the end of the year that everybody can play with, and then we want to make sure that we have something that works as a bridge product for us till we get to spring training. Because you'll hear CJ say this all the time, but baseball is our heart. And hockey is sort of another proof of concept to the way we're approaching the analytics is the right way to do it. And that being, hey, do you not know what's good and what's bad? We can help you with that. And yeah,
I would also say too, Steve, like the other thing with hockey, it's like baseball, I put up the first, we'd say, prototype for baseball in like basically end of April or like middle of May in 2024. So we had, prior to launching for baseball, we launched on July 1st for baseball this year in Handigraphs in the current form for what it is. Think about that. We had like a runway of, 18 plus months essentially where I could kind of be able to focus and work on this from the baseball side. Hockey, it was like August 1st, and that was once we had felt like we had kind of gone through successfully the launch of baseball. There was other features we wanted to add for users, like this thing we have like data views where you can kind of like figure out only the specific columns you want to see. So like we had our first conversation really about, we knew we wanted to do hockey, but it wasn't until like middle of August that that started to really kind of develop into like a game plan for what we wanted to build. So that timeline for hockey was so much more compressed to try and get something up there versus what we had for baseball. And I think that was another thing I was kind of trying to balance from a build standpoint was, we don't, as much as I want to get something out there, I don't want to rush this because we had put so much effort into building baseball and got a great product out of it. I didn't want hockey to be the same.
Yeah, and I think the puck's bouncing the right way for you guys to use some hockey parlance. Before we hopped on here this morning, I played my Monday morning shinny game with a bunch of guys, and we were talking about the fact that no one's really watching NHL hockey right now. We're still swept up in the euphoria of the Blue Jays run, and one fellow in the dressing room who was at Game 7 said, I turned on the Leafs game Saturday night, and he said it just didn't match what was going on with the Blue Jays, and I just turned the TV off, and this is a room of people that are hockey nuts. So I think you're bang on. And I always think too, it's smart not to rush something out there, put a half-assed product out there when you're starting a business. Hey guys, just a couple more questions.
Sure.
Just how is business going? Like, are you pleased with the number of subscribers you're seeing, and then how are you marketing yourselves? And I wonder now with the hockey product going live, will there be any focus on marketing Handigraphs here in Canada?
CJ, you can talk about our numbers. You're closer to that than we are.
Yeah. So numbers wise, like I mentioned, we did a little bit of churn coming out of the baseball season, but we're at about almost 250 plus active subscribers at this point. So our page, the page volume that I had kind of mentioned previously, around 500,000 or so per month, that's still relatively consistent. Maybe it's a little bit lower. I think through October, like we were probably around like 350K or so. But again, like that's kind of expected. Peak, interest in baseball, and I know this, and sure, like as a Bird can also say this too. I think like in baseball, you kind of almost lose attention once football like kicks back in. Like you almost have that like month where you just sort of forget about baseball a little bit, and then you get sucked back in the playoffs, and then it's not really again until April and May where people get very excited to jump back into that. So subscriber wise, like our churn rate, it's like a little bit around I think like almost 10% as of right now, which for us is new, is great. We've really tried to capitalize on giving the product away for people that I know, and Adam, you can speak a little bit more to this, but to folks that we know, like in our inner circles, that will be good advocates, evangelists for Handigraphs. Like that's the thing is, like, we're still not doing any paid advertising for this. Like we're not doing, we're not, going through Google ads, Facebook, etc. We're really kind of just trying to still continue to bring in feedback, beef up the product a little bit more. I think you'll see some more probably aggressive marketing come next year for baseball, because the product is a lot more mature in that sense. But yeah, I mean, right now we're just kind of enjoying this as we've got 200 plus active subs, and it seems like again we're getting constant like good feedback that's coming in, especially through our Discord on it.
And Adam, on the marketing piece.
Yeah, to CJ's point, we've talked to. There's a lot of folks that I know that are in the hockey community. They're especially in Canada. Go figure. They're actually all in Canada that I trust, that do a lot of work with either sporting news or with TSN, and we're just trying to get it in people's hands. We got really good advice from I don't know if like Rick Alec over at he's with Odds Logic and Wager Talk, and he's just been doing this for so long that he's given us some of the best advice as an unofficial kind of advisor to us. And he said, find ways to make it easy for people to know what's good and what's bad, and get it in as many people's hands as possible, and then go from there. Because, you have something that has a clear value. If you people will pay for things that have, other values. So we just want to get it in people's hands. We want to make the product right, and make sure that it is serving purpose. Like we are, this is our official kind of launch of it. People have been able to play with it since Friday. And the number one question that we've gotten is, wait, I got to figure out, how do I use this? And I said, it's coming, because we want to talk about it here. But we think over the next couple of weeks, as people are watching hockey more and football winds down, that we'll be able to kind of continue to have this community that we had of baseball folks that wanted to do hockey, wanted something else as well. And CJ really mentioned that first month of NFL kind of wipes the board on everything. It's very hard to get people to focus. So actually, knowing that we had 300,000 in October, when you had a third the teams and we were competing with NFL, that's pretty awesome. It's good to know. I didn't even know that. But yeah, I think we're trying to get it in folks' hands. So whenever someone asks, like, we got a code for you, we got whatever, tell us what you like and what you don't like. I think pedal to the metal for us is really January through March, because we really want people. That's one, prime time for hockey. There's an Olympic break, but there's prime time for hockey, and it's sort of this bridge time before we do things for baseball. So just continuing to get this in the hands of both creators and media and anybody who has an interest in sport, like NHL. Look, NHL doesn't always have the same interest as everybody, because not everybody has a rink in their community. It's hard to get, despite the successes of all the clubs, it's hard to get Florida people to really care about hockey, because they don't see it when they look out. They don't see the snow when they look outside. So if you are in a very cold weather place and you enjoy puck, message us and we will get you set up on the site, because we would love to have you play around with it over the next couple of months.
Will you guys do something around the Olympic hockey tournament?
We were talking about we were talking about World Baseball Classic for doing things for the baseball side, and I feel like, I don't know, I want to put words in CJ's mouth, but there's probably ways for, like, we could pull roster and there's things that we could do. It's the same metrics,
I mean, as far as like stats through the Olympics, I would say probably not. I mean, that would be something I think is it like really worth the, is the juice worth the squeeze, I
Right.
guess, to go
Yep.
and try and figure out how to source that. As far as though like roster lineups for hockey games and like coming into the Olympics, can you see how individual goalies have been playing? Can you go view season stats? Something that we might end up doing for that would be, right now, like if you go to the site, it's very much a daily focused, dashboard. You look at, here's all your goalies for today. Here's all your projected goalies for tomorrow. That's it. You don't get the, if a team's not playing in the next 2 days, you're not going to see stats on there because it's meant to try and filter that down. I think for the Olympics, what is something we would be able to do is make sort of a static page so that when you go to that, you just see like, okay, let me see everybody's splits, everybody's season stats coming into the Olympics, and how have they been playing? Is somebody going to have like a higher save percentage in the last month compared to other goalies on other international teams? That's something I think that would certainly be doable from our side, to where you could at least have like a quick dashboard to see, here's all the same Handigraphs data that you're used to. It's all the same color coding, and you would have that as sort of like your cheat sheet or your prep to be able to go into the Olympics with.
Right. Hey, Adam, before we let you guys go, maybe just you promote the website, and also give you guys a chance to promote your podcast, which I'm going to subscribe to as soon as we get done this interview.
Yeah, well, we definitely want you on it. We especially because I think we'll have a very lively Toronto episode. So the site's handigraphs.com. If you are listening to this, HG Hockey, if you use that code under annual, it gives you free access until January 6th, which is our producer's birthday. It's also hilarious for other reasons that we picked that date. The podcast is Dad's Bet Baseball. One day a week, it's Dad's Bet Baseball and football. You can find it on all podcast platforms. And CJ and I are pretty accessible on X. I don't actually. CJ's like barely on Instagram, so I don't know. But you can. He's a good CEO. He just stays out of the. Yeah. He stays out of the. Well, I tag you and everything. He stays out of the. He stays out of it, and I'm just like in all of it. But yeah, we really wanted. It's hockey. We wanted Canada to find out about it first. It's your guys' thing. We're very blessed to have several Canadians that are very close to us as terms of product evangelists and NHL experts that are helping us on certain things. So yeah, play around with hockey, and we are Jays fans. We promise. We did not hedge against we didn't do a single bit of hedging against our Jays futures. We were in it to win it. So hoping for next year.
Hey, and CJ, just quickly, chances of Jays getting back to the World Series in 2026?
Oh boy. Well, I mean, not to give away anything, but I do like another team in that division quite a bit next season, and it's not the Yankees and it's not the Red Sox. So I think the Jays, I think they're going to be perfectly well suited to be, good again next year. I fully expect that Bichette is going to be re-signing there. I think it makes a lot of sense for both parties. So the biggest thing for the Jays is, can you build upon what Savage did in the playoffs, and are you going to be able to get some more starting pitching? Because ultimately that was the big advantage. Obviously, it was clear that the Dodgers had against them last year, and I think that's the area I'm really curious to see what the Jays do. But they're going to be aggressive. I think they'll absolutely be one of the teams that'll be right in it. I just don't know if Adam and I will be betting on them, because we're not going to get 40-1 this year.
Right.
Though I will say, as I threw it out there, Addison Barger to lead the league in hits is not a bet I don't hate.
That's a fun one. Yeah,
that'll be fun. That'll probably be what, 200-1. Yeah, that'll be way out there.
Yeah,
his own teammate was second in hits. So that'll be way out. That'll be way out there.
We'll have more of those.
We'll have more of those fun ones
on our podcast, but we probably will be betting the under though on his season total for home runs, just because people will look and be like, oh my god, he had a barrel rate of 20% for the season. We're like, nope, he's Bam Bam. He has hits. He doesn't usually hit a lot of home runs.
That is CJ Buskey and Adam Rosenberg, the co-founders of Handigraphs. guys, it's always cool for us to be able to break some news on the podcast or in the newsletter. So really appreciate you giving us this opportunity to do so around around the Handigraphs hockey product. And like I said, we'll definitely get you back. This was a really fun conversation. It's a little bit different than what we do with the podcast and covering the industry, but this was one of the more fun conversations I've had. So definitely look forward to getting you guys back on before the start of the Major League Baseball season.
Thanks for having us. This is great.
This is awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. And I know I had a little 10-minute dead zone there, but I'm sure Burke is good at talking. He's good at filling space when that happens.
We were able to fill the space quite well. Two guys that media guys and also PR guys as well, CJ. So we were able to pinch it for you quite nicely. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show presented by Bede Gaming. Again, thanks very much to Adam Rosenberg and CJ Buskey for being with us. You can find us, as Adam mentioned earlier, we're on all the various podcast apps. You can also watch this interview on the Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. Thanks again to CJ and Adam for being with us, and we will see everybody again very soon.